Today I'm going to do something a little bit different, and I'm going to share my practice session with you. I get asked quite a lot about how I practice, and I have quite a lot of ideas about practice and some effective ways to make the best of our time. And I felt that simply me sitting and talking to the camera might not necessarily be the most productive way to share those concepts with you. So instead, I'm going to try this format where essentially I'm going to do my practice session, film it, and talk you through what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and how I'm doing it. I thought this would give me the best opportunity to actually explain while things are fresh in my mind. When I'm standing there in front of the camera, not practicing, it's quite hard to articulate the ideas that surface when I'm actually doing it. So my hope is by actually practicing, I will have a much better chance to actually talk to you about relevant things. And hopefully this will give you a few ideas about your own practice sessions and how to make the most of them. So a few things to start with. I'm obviously not going to make you sit here and watch hours and hours of repetition or anything like that. I'm intending to go for about an hour this morning. It's 9:30 in the morning, Thursday morning here. I'm going to go for about an hour, but I'm of course going to use the magic of editing to make this enjoyable for you as best as I can. We need a few things, first of all. And notice perhaps the most overlooked thing. I'm looking out the window. I'm facing the window when I do this. I don't want to feel like I'm in a prison. I was very clear when I built this studio that I needed a window to see the outside. I'm looking out on my house. I can see grass. I can see trees. I can see the sky. We want to be in a comfortable environment that is conducive to focus and hard work and motivation. We don't want to feel oppressed. We don't want to feel trapped or locked in. Some of you, of course, may not be fortunate enough to have such an environment, but if possible, try to make your environment as conducive to motivated focus as possible. And I think being able to see the outside is a really big part of that. I've of course got my drum and my pad. I'm using a pad today, so I don't need to worry about sound. I don't need to worry about hearing protection. I've got my music stand with my material on it. I've got a metronome down here, and I've got a mirror, which you might be able to see here in front of me. So this is really important. So when I actually practice, I stand facing this way, I can look out the window, but crucially, my eyes are always on the mirror in front of me. And I've got it set at such a height that I can see the surface of the drum, I can see the drumsticks, I can see my hands, and I can see everything I need to make sure I'm trying to get everything as evenly as possible. And I think that's really important. So if at all you can, I would really encourage you to practice with a mirror to provide some form of feedback for yourself. So let's begin. I'm going to begin with something that is often overlooked, and forgive me if I'm looking in this direction while I'm talking to you. I'm going to try and look at the camera, but focus on what I'm doing. I'm going to begin with warming up. Now, this sounds really obvious, but many people neglect it, and I've been guilty of neglecting it myself before. But very simply, we're not putting ourselves in a position to learn and grow and develop if we are going in cold. So I'm simply just working my way into it, loosening my muscles, getting the blood flowing, and almost sort of teaching myself that, okay, we're in work mode now, it's time to focus. And you can see I'm focusing predominantly on my left hand. Over the years, being a right-handed drummer, being a drum kit player, my right hand is very, very strong. My dominant right hand is very, very strong. My left hand is the weak link, like perhaps many of you. And if my left hand could do the same things my right hand could do, I would be a far better drummer. So I'm focusing predominantly on my left hand, and you can hear I'm doing accented triplets. This is focusing on my fulcrum, forces my fulcrum to be strong. It's focusing on my fingers. It's allowing my wrist to move. It's allowing a bit of forearm motion. And even now, as I'm talking to you, I can feel the blood flowing. It feels like I've just started a very minor workout. That's not because I find this difficult. It's because I'm not warmed up. The blood's not flowing yet. I'm not doing this with a metronome. This is simply a physical motion. Now I'm starting to feel a little bit of burn in that forearm, just a little bit, just minor, and that shows me that I am indeed starting to warm up just a little bit. Just going to go for a few minutes more. Starting to feel a bit of burn down my forearm here. Starting to feel a bit of tightness creeping into my fulcrum, but that's okay because the purpose here is to warm up, to limber up. But already, my mind is going into analysis mode. How's the position of my thumb? How's the position of my fingers? How's the angle of my stick? Just picking up the volume now to get those muscles working, to get the blood flow. Okay, we can start to get this right hand involved now. The right hand's just filling in the gaps. Now my left hand is starting to struggle a little bit. Starting to tighten, starting to tense up. So that's okay, we're just warming up. You can see my technique is starting to fail. I'm trying to maintain the accent. Now you can't see what I see in terms of what's going on in front of me, but as I brought in the right hand there, control started to diminish on my left hand, especially as I'm trying to talk. I'm struggling to maintain the rhythm all the time. Okay, now we're getting to the point there where tightness is creeping in and tension is creeping in. What I was trying to say, as I was bringing in the right hand into the roll, trying to talk, trying to keep that accent going, my left hand was starting to lose control. I was starting to change the motion. I was starting to tense up and tightness has crept into my forearm. But that's okay. That's why we need to do this. Some minor stretching just to keep everything limber. The whole purpose of this initial point is simply to warm up the muscles, get ourselves prepared to learn, get ourselves prepared to play. I'm going to move on to some basic warm-up exercises now, and the focus is going to shift slightly. I'm working out of my own book here, Virtuoso, and I'm going to use some of the fundamental stroke studies because they are, as they are designed, they are perfect for just working some fundamental strokes. So I'm going to begin with the single stroke and the double stroke fundamental studies, specifically the triplet variations that use the frise. Notice I'm placing the book to the side of my mirror, so my focus is predominantly on my mirror here. This is where the metronome comes in. Now we're at about 70, well, we are at exactly 70 BPM here. And this is roundabout right for the piece that I'm working on. Single stroke study 2, we've got 30-second note triplet frise within a single stroke roll. It sounds like this. And the purpose here is to try and even up my strokes, to try and increase the articulation, the level of control. I'm fast enough at 70 that it is a challenge, but not so fast that it is beyond my control. So we're at that sort of middle point. Again, I'm not pushing the speed here. I'm trying to ease myself in and get myself focusing on the control. Now, crucially, I'm going to focus on doing this leading left-handed. So for those of you with the book, this is page 22, bar 5. I'm just going to repeat the single bar to try and increase my left hand. So for the next few minutes or so, my focus is going to be on watching the mirror, watching my hand, and trying to keep that left hand as controlled and in the right position, as balanced as I would with my right hand. I'm starting to feel a bit of disparity in my fulcrum, which is one of my main targets at the moment. That fulcrum in my left hand is often shifting between my middle finger and my index finger, whereas on my right hand it's completely static, it's completely still. Now that particular frise figure with the 30-second note sextuplets at the end is quite difficult for that left hand lead. So what I'm going to do now, after I've sort of just tried it as an introduction, I'm going to drop the tempo so it's much more within my control, and really focus on the grip for a few minutes, looking at that fulcrum and again, just trying to match it up with the right hand. So I've dropped down to 55 here. I don't know how well you can hear the metronome, but I've dropped down to 55 BPM. And I've added a tick for the offbeat, 2 and 3 and 4 and at a slower tempo with more gaps in it, greater space between the beats. It just means I'm a little bit more able to keep precise with my rhythm. Now at this slow speed, it highlights the lack of control. So that's really what I'm focusing on here. And now I'm going to go for about 5 minutes. And I actually find this quite meditative. Constant small adjustments. How's my posture? Trying to bring that left hand into parity with my right. Moved on to bar 12 now. About halfway. So that's 5 minutes, and I can feel myself nice and warmed up now, nice and limber. And I was really trying to focus on bringing my left hand into parity with my right hand there. It's difficult. That is a difficult sequence to practice. But the single stroke is, of course, one of the fundamental strokes that we need in order to play the snare drum or the drum kit. So I always try to begin with a little warm-up in that manner. As what I was trying to communicate, although it's very difficult to speak as I'm doing that, was just how much real-time feedback is going on. So every time I'm playing, every stroke I play, I'm watching my position in the mirror, I'm watching my hands, I'm trying to make micro adjustments, and most importantly, which I can't communicate over video, I'm trying to match what the sticks in my left hand, what the stick in my left hand feels like compared to my right hand, and I'm trying to bring those two into parity. So I was focusing on just one or two individual bars there. I'm going to run through the whole study now at the same tempo to see how the transitions feel. So there's the study. It took about 3 minutes to do. It's 32 bars long in total, and at 55 beats per minute there, I'm just over half tempo. The target tempo for this is 104 BPM. So in its full form, it's a fast study, and it's designed to be. This was written with the purpose of requiring a very high level of specific technique in order to perform at tempo. That is a long-term goal for me. But I'm practicing it very, very slowly because at the moment control is the main issue. Not necessarily control of my general technique, but control with regards to that left-hand fulcrum. And I find this one especially difficult with those 6s and 12s at the end of each bar, that it's a really good way for me to focus on the control. I'm going to try the whole piece again now, but I'm going to bump it up. I'm going to take it up to about 75 BPM, so just under 75% tempo. And this is going to be something of a benchmark test. I want to see how well I can retain control at that 75% mark. So not a bad attempt there at 75, but something that is standing out to me is that my left index finger is doing something different to my right, or specifically, it's doing something that my right index finger is not. So I'm going to spend a few minutes just focusing down on that again. The most difficult bar in this piece is bar 12, which has got the 12 tuplet at the end of it. So 12 strokes in the space of a quarter note. Obviously, at any tempo, that's fast. So this, again, is a really good bar to hone in on and focus down and see if I can get to the bottom of what's happening with my index finger there. So I'm going to slow right back down. I'm going to go down to about 45 or so to really see if I can focus on where I'm losing the control, somewhere between my fulcrum, the two fingers in my fulcrum. So I'm just going to focus on bar number 12 now. Sorry, 13. Bar 13. And my index finger is wanting to move away in a way that my right hand is not. My left index finger keeps sort of doing this motion, whereas my right hand is completely still. So I'm really trying to get to the bottom. And I think it's to do with my thumb, the way in which my thumb is gripping the stick compared to that right hand. Like it's compensating. And really at this stage, I'm going by feel at least as much as what I can see in the mirror. The contact points between my fingers and the stick, I'm really conscious of those. And I'm watching in the mirror, and then I'm analysing what it feels like. Why does it feel like there's a contact point there and there? Why is that different to what's going on here? And actually, that's about the half-hour point. I'm going to do another 3 or 4 minute run of that bar I was just practicing, and then I'm going to take a break for a few minutes. So this is bar 13. I said it incorrectly earlier. This is bar 13, the left-handed version from Single Strokes 2, page 22 from the Snare Drum Virtuoso, and it's one of the most difficult bars for me because of that left-hand control. So I'm going to do, I don't know, maybe 100 bars, 100 repetitions. Yeah, let's go for 100. And throughout all of it, I'm switching my internal focus between watching in the mirror and how it feels like the contact points between my thumb, index, and middle finger, and trying to find out why it feels like I lose control in that left hand. So again, this is all exploration, experimentation, trying to get to the bottom of a very specific problem. So 100 repetitions, here we go. So I'm on about repetition 73. I'm just starting to feel my focus waver. So I'm just going to refocus. These final repetitions is where you really have to focus. Don't let them become mindless. The mistakes creep in and we become complacent. So I've got just over 10 repetitions to go, and I'm going to try and make them the best 10 that I've done. Still making micro adjustments, correcting as I go. And there we go. So it took about 8 or 9 minutes, just over 9 minutes, I think, to do those 100 repetitions. Your focus starts to go. You start to lose concentration, mistakes start to creep in, and we become complacent. So I was really trying to maintain my focus. 9 minutes doesn't sound like a long time, but it can be quite difficult to maintain focus for that long. Now I'm due a break. I've been actually going for nearly 40 minutes now. The one thing I want to talk about before I resume after the break is how I just structured what I just did. And it was broadly structured into 3 loose phases. The first one, very simply, was a warm-up. It was just moving, it was getting the blood flowing, especially on my weaker left hand, which was the focus of today's session. The second phase was essentially fault finding. You perhaps noticed that as I was working through various bars in this study and playing the study as a whole, I was experimenting, I was exploring, I was troubleshooting to try and find where I was, what sort of level I was at, and what problems occur. And I was essentially identifying weaknesses in my left-hand fulcrum. And then the final phase, which I've just completed here, is the repetition. So we can't improve without all of those phases working together. Repetition on its own, especially if it's mindless, is worthless. It is completely worthless. But when that repetition is focused on something that we have identified through feedback, and then we focus our attention on the repetition and try and improve that issue, it's the repetition that actually enacts the growth. It actually causes our muscles and our neurological system, our neurological pathways, our nervous system. It encourages that to actually change. We're learning more and more about neuroplasticity, how the brain works, how skills are acquired. And the one thing that comes up again and again and again is the importance of focused repetition. So I just did 100 bars of this bar, 100 repetitions of this bar. It took just under 10 minutes. And that is the actual period that will lead to the direct physical brain growth. Everything leading up to that was preparation. It was finding the fault. It was making sure I was focused. It was making sure I was aware of what I was about to focus on. But it was the actual repetition that is going to lead to the physical growth. So I'm going to take a break. I'm actually going to go and step outside for a minute. A bit of fresh air is really good to reset the brain, reset the focus, and then I'll come back with the second part of my session. Okay, I started about 45 minutes ago. I've had a bit of a break. I've completed the first stage of my practice session, which was focused on technique. It was focused on addressing a particular outstanding issue of mine. I'm now going to turn my attention to the main sort of body of the practice, which is learning one of the pieces. So I have here 3 drafts of some compositions I'm working on. And I intend to, these will be published as part of a collection of marches for the snare drum. And to mark the release, I'm going to record performances of all of them. Now I have 3 here. I'm ultimately going to do 10 or 12 or something like that for the book. But I'm using them as the focus of my practice. I want to learn them, I want to play them, and I of course need to prepare them for performance. So I've got a very clear goal. And it's nice to have that goal. Having some reason to practice, I think, is very, very important for the motivation of practicing. Now, I have always been known amongst my friends and colleagues as a very good practicer. I'm a very dedicated practicer. I enjoy practicing. I find it meditative. I find it calming. And I really enjoy the sense of progress and the sense of focus. However, if I don't have a reason to practice beyond just get better, that all disappears. I will be as lazy as anybody else if I don't have a reason to practice. So I always have somewhere in the future a deadline that requires me to perform something, even if it is just something for my YouTube channel, something not for a client or a customer or a colleague or something like that. Even if it's just for my own sense of performance that I'm going to do one of my pieces on YouTube or something like that, I always give myself a project so that I have reason to practice. That provides the motivation, and it of course provides the focal point for the practice sessions themselves. Now I'm intending to do about another half an hour. So in half an hour, there's no way I can be productive on 3 pieces of music. So I'm going to focus on one of them here, which I'm being a little bit cheeky, but it's my favorite one of the 3. So I'm going to focus on that today because I know that I will be able to dedicate the next half an hour or so to it. So the piece is in 1816. That shouldn't scare you. It is just 2 groups of 9. 1816 just means I can write that meter without tuplets everywhere. I don't want to write the whole thing in non-uplets. So having it in 1816 is just the easiest way for me to express 3 groups of 3 per beat. It is a march, so the accent pattern is relatively simple. And the first thing I'm going to do, I've got it already pre-programmed into Polynome, which is the metronome app I use. And the first thing I'm going to do is simply play it. I'm just going to play it start to finish at round about 60% tempo. I'm at the target tempo is 90. I'm at about 68 here. I might just drop that down. Yeah, if we drop that down to 60, I'm at 2/3 tempo. That's about right. And I'm just going to increase my familiarity with it. This is benchmarking, this is fault finding, and crucially, it is increasing my familiarity with the piece. So I'm not concerned with performance at this stage. This isn't practicing in the sense of just raw repetition. This is just a sense of getting to know the piece a little bit better. It's not long since I wrote it. It's still being drafted, so I might still get my pencil out and make a few corrections. But ultimately, this is like if it's like a first or second or a third date. You're still trying to get to know the person. You're just trying to learn the ins and outs, find the pieces that trip you up, find the pieces that are a little bit easier, and highlight the crucial passages that I need to work on. So this is just going to be a run through at around 2/3 tempo. And you'll notice I'm highlighting the 16th note there. That just helps with my precision of the timing. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So there was the piece. It took about 3 minutes to get through at 2/3 tempo. It was not bad. There's nothing in there that I can't do. But again, as I say, it's just to increase my familiarity. I made a slight error up here on the second page, but that was actually just a lapse in concentration. I think my phone buzzed in the background. There's a lesson, always turn your phone off when you're trying to focus on something. But there's nothing in there that I can't play. Now notice, because it's a 2-page piece, I've actually obscured my mirror. My focus now is no longer on my technique and trying to perfect my technique. I'm focused entirely on learning a piece of music, and that has to be a mental shift. We can't be worrying about our technique all the time when we are trying to focus on learning a piece of music. However, there's a lot of vocabulary in this piece that is technique heavy. There are some drag figures and there's some fast, quiet rolls which you may have seen in there. To play those even at 2/3 tempo requires a high degree of technical control. So even though I'm not looking at it in the mirror, I'm still aware, I'm still trying to maintain those lessons from the previous session where I was looking in the mirror. I'm still trying to bring those hand techniques, the control, the balance, the evenness. I'm still trying to apply those while I'm working through these. Now, I'm a big believer, and this really informed my approach to Virtuoso. I'm a big believer in learning technique through application. I will get better by practicing this piece more than I would if I were practicing solely exercises. There is nothing wrong with exercises as such, but the real growth happens when you do it for real. So in learning a piece of music like this, I'm essentially fulfilling two things. First of all, I'm fulfilling the deadline, the project that I created for myself. I will get to the point where I can perform this as I need to. But secondly, I'm increasing my technique generally, my ability generally, because I am learning a piece that is technically difficult. So what I'm going to do now is set the tempo much closer to the target tempo and see how far through it I can get. And what this is going to do is identify where I need to practice to bring it up to performance tempo. So this is again kind of like benchmarking. Then we go through it in small sections to bring each section up to tempo. So target tempo is 90. I'm actually not convinced that that will stay at 90. I think that will need to come down a little bit. So I'm just going to try that at 80. I'm just going to see how I get on here, and this is going to identify where I'm going to spend the rest of my focus. Second section was a little bit more difficult. Let's take it from that second section again. Okay, so that's the third section. Now this is quite an interesting point, because you can see now technique is not the issue. I might keep this piece at 80. I might push it a little further, but this is round about performance tempo, and I'm not so much struggling with the technique. I'm struggling with the familiarity of the phrases. So where I went wrong there was within the rhythmic phrase, not a technical issue. So it's not that I was incapable technically of performing the figure, it's that I didn't know the figure well enough to perform it cleanly at that tempo. There is a difference there. So 9, that's a 9-bar section. And that's a 9-bar section, yeah, because it's got some over the bar line phrasing, which makes it a little bit awkward. So that's what I'm going to focus on. What did I just say? 9 bars. So I'm going to do the section 10 times. So I'm going to set my metronome looper to 91. No, I'm not. Yes, I am. 91. So that will give me a 1-bar count in and then 10 repetitions of the 9-bar section. And of course, I'm going to do it much more slowly. I'm going to drop the tempo because my goal here is familiarity. It is almost not memorization, but incorporation, internalization of the rhythmic passages. And also it will give me a chance to focus on the technique as well. So I'm going to drop it right down to about 50 and we'll see how we go. So I ended up doing an extra run through there. I'd started the extra on. I didn't know how many reps I'd done. So I did it, I think, 11 times through there. That's one of the nice things about having a metronome that can count the loops for you. You can focus on what you're doing and don't need to worry about counting or anything like that. So again, this particular phase, the repetition, is in the actual act. This is the actual phase of learning. This is where you are drilling in the motions, and this is where you are learning and familiarizing yourself with the piece. Because the tempo is low enough, just over halfway, this is a sort of 55-60% tempo, it gives me chance to really focus on the details. So I was really trying to accent the accents and keep the unaccented strokes nice and low, really trying to make the drags nice and tight, really trying to adhere to the rhythm closely. It's giving me enough time to think. It's giving me enough time to consciously focus on each aspect of the piece. Now then, to finish off, because I've actually already, we're over an hour into this session now, I'm going to finish off with a method that I talked about in my previous video about attaining speed on the drums. I'm going to try and work this passage up from 70 BPM to 80 BPM, which is something like approaching target tempo. So what I'm going to do, I've set the looper to 10 bars, so that gives me a 1 bar count in and then once through the 9 bar section. I've started at 70 BPM. If I do it correctly, satisfactorily, I'm going to increase it by 2 BPM. If I do it unsatisfactorily, I'm going to drop it by 1 BPM, and I'm going to see if I can get to that target of 80 BPM. That would essentially entail 5 correct run-throughs in a row. We will see. So 70 BPM to start. And again here, this is just pushing it now. This is taking me out of my comfort zone, and it is forcing me to keep up, focusing on the performance on a larger scale now, thinking of on a more macro scale rather than the micro scale of previous sessions. Takes me up to 71 now. I dropped down to 69 because I made a mistake. That last run through was nice, so I've jumped up to 71. Nice. Up to 73. I'm starting to feel it now, starting to really hear that the phrasing and starting to become a little bit more familiar with the overall passage. 73. There's a transition. I know you can't see it on from the camera, but there's a transition from the bottom of the first page up to the top of the second page. That there's quite a tricky rhythmic passage. And I just about managed to hang on to it there, but that highlights the sort of the weak spot in that passage. Anyway, I'm going to jump up to 75. That's going to be my focus this time. Yeah, nice. I think I'm really starting to feel it now. 77. Oh, sloppy at the end. I'm starting to lose focus now. As I say, we're over an hour in. I'm at about an hour and 10 minutes. My hand's starting to hurt, which is to do with squeezing from, I guess, compensating for a weakness in control. I'm going to drop it down there. I'm going to take it down to 66. I wasn't happy with the ending there. Really just going to try and reset my focus to get through these final repetitions to try and polish this off nicely. That was better. Take it up to 78. And remember, it's everything I'm doing here is essentially just trying to get my repetitions in. I need the repetitions to actually grow, to actually learn. So let's take that up to 78. See if we can get through that one again. I'm trying to focus on control and internalization of the phrases. I'm going to drop that. Just a slight error at the end. 77. Okay, back to 79. Okay, that was quite nice. It's getting difficult now that we're around about the performance tempo, but I'm still just about in control of that. So this takes us up to 81. Nice. Okay, there we go. Now, at that speed, that's faster than I can functionally read the piece. I'm using the piece there as just this instant reminder, but because I've done the groundwork and I'm familiar enough with the passage to be able to hear it, I'm essentially now correcting myself by ear. I'm going by ear more than I am going by visually reading the notes. So that's a nice transition to make, because I'm no longer quite as reliant on sight reading it. I'm using that just as a guide, just as a reminder, but I'm allowing my audible knowledge of the piece to inform my playing, which is why I'm able to sort of navigate those trickier passages when actually, when I consider it, I'm not reading them consciously. It's too fast for me to read consciously. It's just there as an instant visual cue, and my ears are doing the rest. So I'm about ready to leave it there. I'm at about an hour and 15 minutes now. I'm just going to do one more run through of the whole piece, just as a kind of polish off. So I'll do that now. I'm going to do it at round about, I'm going to drop it back down again, maybe 65 all the way through. Okay, so that was just a nice sort of reinforcement to polish it off. Again, my focus is starting to slip now, so I'm overdue a break. I'm just going to finish with one final thing, and again, this is another very important but often overlooked thing within practice, and that is the act of reinforcement. Again, studies have shown that the more frequently we reinforce the things we learn, the more strongly and the more quickly we learn them. So I'm going to go right back to what I did at the beginning, the single stroke study, those groups of frise, and I'm very simply just going to run through the single stroke study again to reinforce the earlier technique work I did. So I'm going to go around about 60 BPM here, and I'm just going to run through the study just to reinforce that work I did previously. Back on the mirror. And I think that will do me for now. So when I started recording this, it was 9:30. It is now 10:50. I think that's a pretty decent session for a Thursday morning. I am going to, I teach later. I've got students coming this afternoon, around about 4:30ish. Around about 4 o'clock, I'm going to do a quick redo of all of this. I'm going to perform that piece again. I'm going to perform that piece again, to ensure that reinforcement happens. I'm not going to go to the same degree of detail. I'm not going to go to the same lengths, but I need to just reinforce those things I focused on today. But I won't bother recording that. It's just more of the same, but regular reinforcement. So my battery indicator is flashing at me. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope this has given you something to think about. Please do get in touch with your own questions or your own comments on how you practice, and I'd love to hear from you. Thanks very much. See you on the next one. Good luck in your own practice.